Peace beneath you. I'm Burak, and welcome to Cathlist. At the Last Supper, Jesus set a precedent for the church to establish guidelines for the practice of its most important ritual. And the general instruction of the Roman Missal, Un-GIRM for short, is a detailed document of guidelines for how the Mass is to be said. And yes, it is called the germ. Not germ like the disease-causing microorganism, but germ, as in the acronym for its title. While the germ is instructive, there are occasionally slight variations that different churches use relative to each other, and that totally makes sense. There are charismatic parishes that encourage speaking in tongues, and there are more traditional ones. And of course, not everyone speaks the same language, so that changes a few minor things as well. Over time, some folks have started doing things during the Mass that aren't exactly quite right. One might say, not germain. Iris, don't glare at me. It makes me feel bad. Here's one example. This one could be problematic, but we're diving into this, so bear with us, don't hate us. Here's one example. Holding hands during the Lord's Prayer. Doing this isn't exactly wrong, but it's not prescribed as part of the germ. It says, the priest invites us to pray, and the Lord's Prayer is then said or sung along with the priest. So good news. You can safely pretend you don't see the neighboring stranger's sweaty palm tentatively sliding towards you without violating the rubrics of the Mass. We've got more where that came from, so stick around. Have you ever turned to give someone the handshake of peace and they go in for a hug? Well, why does your grandmother call it the kiss of peace if no one ever kisses anyone except for her? How about flashing the peace sign down the pew to your cousin sitting on the aisle, or walking around and leaning past people to get to the person 2 rows behind you because you're just such good friends? Are any of these legit? Is it shake hands, right hand only, with a firm but not crushing ring into the bones of their fingers grip while looking them in the eyes? What should you be saying? Peace be with you, peace of Christ, peace homie, what do we do? Well, the germ actually gives license to the Conference of Bishops to prescribe the manner in which we give the sign of peace. This tends to follow local custom, which could include a handshake, hug, kiss, etc. But the variations here are not why you may be doing this wrong. The germ specifies that whatever the manner in which peace is extended, it should be done to only those nearest you in a sober manner. So, going on a field trip to find people's hands to shake, saying something funny and irreverent like peas beneath you, or even smiling and laughing during this exchange are out. I really hope people don't think I'm a major buzzkill after this episode. Skipping the precious blood when receiving communion. Actually, this is okay. Just like all of Catholic teaching, the germ maintains that both the body and blood of Jesus contain him in totality, and that receiving only one is acceptable, though both are often offered. We included it here because we've heard it debated by various people before and thought we should clear that up for you. And it's actually fantastic because people who have gluten intolerance can still receive the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ by just receiving from the chalice. And folks who struggle with alcoholism can still receive by taking the host, because as we know, the appearance and taste of bread and wine remain even though the substance has changed. More on that in another episode. Gosh, that was a great sermon. This one I hear a lot, and often from those who have converted to Catholicism after being part of another religion or denomination for years. And I'm sure you're familiar with that part of the Mass after the Gospel is read, and the congregation takes a seat while a priest or deacon preaches a message relative to the readings and connects it to people's lives. That talk is called a homily, not a sermon. What's the difference? And isn't it the exact same thing as a sermon? And get with the program, Pete, you might say? Well, there is a difference. And no, technically you may not use them interchangeably. A sermon is a general lesson on matters of faith, church doctrine, or other general religious topics. A sermon isn't bound by particular readings. I could give a sermon, but I can't give a homily. A homily, however, is delivered directly after the gospel reading during the Mass. Lay people, i.e. not clergy, i.e. not priests or deacons, are not permitted to deliver a homily. In other words, calling a homily a sermon is technically accurate, but it's a specific kind of sermon, and since not all sermons are homilies, the term homily is to be used. It's kind of like the rule about squares being rectangles you learned and then forgot about from your 7th grade math class. Both clergy and lay people are expected to bow at various times during the Mass, which is probably not surprising to most Catholics. Bowing, of course, is a sign of reverence by the persons doing the bowing to someone deserving of respect and honor. There are specific moments when we are supposed to bow. However, I'd be willing to bet that most Catholics don't do it right. For instance, the germ specifies a bow of the head is to be made when the three divine persons are named together and at the names of Jesus, of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and of the saint in whose honor Mass is being celebrated. This means that in addition to all the standing, sitting, and kneeling that's going on at various times during the Mass, you're supposed to be bowing quite a lot as well. And any other time you're supposed to bow, don't do a lame, weak head nod. Certain times, like during the Creed and before receiving communion, are to be a profound bow, meaning you bow from the waist. The other times, like at the names of Jesus and Mary, it's okay to reverently bow your head. And last for now, leaving Mass early. The Mass is ended, go in peace. If you haven't heard that line yet, from the priest, Mass isn't over yet. Get your butt back in the pew. Seriously though, respect for the liturgy and decorum dictates that you wait until the priest has kissed the altar and departed as well before you hustle out for coffee and donuts. And that's all the time we have for now, folks. Thank you for watching this episode of Cathlist. I'm Pete Burak, and we'll see you next week. And at the names of Jesus, of the Blessed Virgin Mary, blessed, before you hustle out for coffee and donuts. And that was a great take.
That was a really great.
Ruined by a door. Get your back butt, bit your back butt in the pew. Get your back butt.